Val Lennox, it's wonderful to have you back, and Jeanette, thanks for bringing Mum along. And a special welcome to Neil Watson, who's over here all the way from Australia. Neil, it's just great to have you here, and hopefully catch up with you again. It's lovely to have you here with your mum and your dad this morning. Very moving slideshow that Aileen put together there. Thank you, Aileen, very much for that. And you may have noted in Andrew's reading from 2 Corinthians that the word consolation is used about 10 times or something. It's a lot. You've got to get your tongue around that. And consolation simply means that when you have been hurt or disappointed, that some comfort and hope and strength is given to you in the midst of a sad situation. So it is acknowledging that there is a real sense of loss and sadness, but comfort is offered either by a person or by a circumstance. It's a beautiful word. We don't use it often enough. We use it, for example, perhaps after somebody has passed away, but my only consolation is it was a very quick, peaceful death, for example. Or the loneliness I feel in my life is unbearable at times, but the only consolation is I have friends who will reach out to me from time to time and be with me in my loneliness. Consolation acknowledges the sadness of the world, but in this passage from Corinthians we see that we are not left alone in that sadness. I'm going to come back to Paul's reading in a minute. But in the Luke reading, we're stepping in, as you know, into the kind of almost the end of the Christmas story in Luke's Gospel. And so far, it's been a pretty happy one on the whole. There's been, angels, there's been shepherds, there's been lots of joy, and a birth is born, a baby's born, and Simeon has just blessed the wee baby. And Simeon, in the few verses before this, is described as waiting for the consolation of Israel. Waiting for the consolation of Israel. And as you know, after this passage, Anna comes up, who's been a widow for about 60 plus years, waiting in the temple. So, we're stepping into this story, and this is the first sad bit, a shadow coming into the Christmas story, in which Simeon doesn't pull his punches. He says that Jesus will face a lot of trouble and opposition in his life. And then he says to Mary, in these harrowing words, a sword will pierce your own soul too. And the Greek word for sword here is not the short stabbing sword that the Romans had, but it's a long sword. And it's a very powerful metaphor in which you see how grief and sadness can conflict a woman. There is no doubt that through our children we become vulnerable again. No matter how old your kids are, Neil, right? No matter how old your kids are, your dad and mum still worry about you. Jill, that's true for you too. It's never ending. My parents still call me, "Hi, wee pal, how are you getting on?" Even though I'm 55, it's ridiculous. Parents still worry about their children no matter how old their kids are. Because at the heart of being a parent, and particularly of being a mum, is this sense in which you take upon yourself your own children's troubles. These are things that you bear. If we look back at our own mums, we see that. And these images we have from Ukraine, if there is a word I could use for those mothers holding or carrying or walking with their children in these awful, vulnerable situations, it is consolation. They are trying to give their children some strength and comfort in what is a very difficult and sad and very scary context. Now, the lectionary people who chose these, because these are the readings that are chosen specifically for Mothering Sunday, I think they chose these two sets of readings because amidst all the joy and the flowers and the brightness and the spring of Mothering Sunday, and I'm going to have a meal with my mum later on after church today, it's a joyous day. But it's a recognition that the church, now and again, the recognition that grounds the fact that mothers mothers so often in their lives and their experience, they encapsulate the tensions and the struggles of what it means to be human. Because Simeon and Anna, when we step into their story, you quickly realize that for these people of Israel at this time, suffering is a way of life. And patiently waiting for things to change is a way of life. That is what comes through Simeon and Anna's conversation with Jesus and his parents. And their situation is looking for the redemption from the Romans and the freedom and the Messiah to come as a longing for something different. And it's mothers that often they take that on themselves. I was on the phone just to Aranti, who was a Sri Lankan girl who was here a couple of years back, and it is hard for them. One of the big things that is happening in the world today that is not talked about, it's off stage, but is even bigger than COVID, is even bigger than Ukraine, is the fact that COVID economically has not really affected the Western world that much. The big ticket headlines, things are carrying on. But in the two-thirds world, and places like Sri Lanka, which were struggling out of poverty into something else, COVID and the economic implications of it has absolutely knocked them back. And basic foodstuff for Aranti and the family is doubled now. Inflation is mayhem. They can't get gas for their cooking. It's never been like this in 3 or 4 generations. And there is serious worries in people who know what they're talking about, is that we are almost back to where we were at the end of the 1980s and 1990s of this huge problem of debt in the two-thirds world. And this is a Holocaust that is coming, the juggernaut that just can't be stopped on us. And it will be mothers that will bear the brunt of that, trying to figure out how they're going to feed the kids, how they're going to keep the show on the road. So these readings are very poignant for us today. So as we celebrate and give thanks for our mums, and as we give thanks for what they've brought into our lives, and as Anne will be leading us on into sessions just after this, if we give thanks for Mother Earth, we give thanks for Mother Church, and all these things, we give thanks for our own personal mums. I think readings like today anchor us in the fact that for so many mothers around the world at this time, there's a time of great struggle and grief and pain. You see, Mary was warned that through Jesus' rejection, she herself would feel grief. And unfortunately for many mothers, and I've had just 2 separate conversations with parents, with mothers just this last week, of teenagers who are exposed to bullying and harassment at school and the mental health issues that come from that. And it's harrowing. I've had a Facebook message from another parent whose son is having to be sent off to a psychological unit just because of the sheer, there's a vulnerability and exposure to teenagers today particularly, which is difficult for parents and particularly for mothers to deal with. So I think on this Mothering Sunday, we could take some encouragement from Paul's reading, from Paul's letter to Corinthians, which is talking about as we suffer, God will give us consolation in that suffering, that God will not abandon us. And you could say that in the person of Jesus and in the person, because Jesus must have been close to his mum, and I have said this in previous years. I know it is not recorded, but I am really hoping that the first person Jesus appeared to after the resurrection was his mum. You might tell anybody else that, but she could give him a clip over the ear if she was third or the fourth down the line. Jesus had a mother. God had a mother. God had a mother that bore him. And in her suffering, he himself suffered. So at this time of great uncertainty and mayhem in the world, can I just encourage you to pray? We have a session this evening at South Cadder Hall, between 6 and 6:30, to pray for Ukraine. And we'll do it again next Sunday between 6 and 6:30. Give thanks for the memories of your own mums. Remember how they entered with you into your moments of suffering in your life, whatever that form that may have taken. Mums are not perfect, I know that. Not easy. Sometimes we have complicated relationships with our mums. But our mums, I would like to pray, were there for us when we needed them. Sometimes at great cost to themselves. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.